Okay, so I have now started the recording so we can post this on the web later. I want to thank you all for joining and thank those who tune in and watch this later on. Always appreciate that. And the topic this morning is kind of one where we need to come up with a bunch of other topics to talk about. I went back and looked at the list of things we've discussed. And Ken started it. I've continued that list when I took over. And after a while, it looks like we've talked about everything. What else do we want to talk about? The one thing I want to avoid, though, I don't know how many of you also got the survey from AAW this week, where they wanted to know what they needed to do from a strategic standpoint as they went forward. And my comment to them was the magazine is getting things that are much too complicated for a lot of us to go try. And I thought that they were losing touch with the basics that used to be there on wood turning and helping people get in and get organized. I don't want this group to go in that same direction. So I'm looking for your suggestions and things that you would like to see us discuss. We can cycle through again because not everybody's on the call all the time. And the other thing is, if it's been a year or two since we've talked about that particular subject, chances are there are several of us that have forgotten all about it. And so a refresher is always a good thing to have. So I had originally thought today I wanted to talk about what's the process you use in finishing in terms of what do you use for a material, how many coats do you do, what do you do in between? And I went back and looked and we'd already talked about that, I think like in September of last year. So with that as an introduction, I'm open to suggestions, ideas, or even just general things you want to talk about today.
Bruce,
Yes,
if
sir.
I may, I think it's a good idea, a very good idea to revisit, excuse me, finishing. Some of us, may have changed what they do with finishing. And also, we have several new members that have not been a part of Chips and Grits, so they would benefit from that. Albeit, yes, they can go back on September of last year and watch that video. But I think it's a good one because I get so many questions. David, for one, and Dan Craighead, new members, they ask questions about finishing. So I think it's a very good one. That's worthwhile to go do again sometime in the future that we advertise and try to get more people involved and joining Zoom with us. So that's my input. Finishing.
Okay, excellent.
I agree with Mark on that. Also, when some finish is mentioned by somebody, then later on one of us might try it and have problems with it or find that, oh, okay, that's a new one we like. Things change as we try new things that have been suggested. So I think it's good to revisit things for that point. It's not always a refresher. Sometimes we gain a new insight from that we didn't catch the first time. It's like rewatching a movie. You may not have caught certain things your first time through, but later on when you go through it again, there's new things that you learn or pick up on that you didn't the first time. So revisiting things is helpful just because we may not have tried it before, and we'll pick up a new idea from someone and try it. Someone in it was either a Tuesday demo or a Chips and Grits was talking about texturing in finishes, like adding something to make it textured. I thought it was Dick. He gave me some other ideas about hammering for a finish before finishing, before I was trying to figure out something about adding texture to the finish. And I can't remember who said it, and I can't remember what the concept was. So revisiting and picking up on things again, I think is very helpful.
Thank you. And I concur with your comment about finishing, because the discussion at Tuesday breakfast this week, if we talked about finishing, Spence has changed his mind recently about what he wants to do. And he's now on to tried and true.
I've been looking at tried and true stuff. I'm such a newbie. The only thing I have now is Danish oil. I've got a dark and a white and natural, and that's it. I'm looking at lacquer, shellac, and tried and true, and I've got a lot of learning to do.
Come on by and I'll show you how to put CA glue on the piece of wood.
Okay.
That's my favorite finish.
CA glue, huh?
CA
Yes.
glue.
And that
Yeah.
allows you to get a nice gloss too. It
Yeah.
buffs up well.
Bruce, one of the things that I think we have talked about it before, and I don't get into a lot of the chips and grits because of my work schedule. So maybe you guys have talked about this more than I remember, but shop layout as it relates to safety, shop layout as it relates to production. They're not necessarily the same thing. And I'm probably going to give up production before I'll give up safety. It was in this club, Prescott area Woodturners, where somebody had said, you probably shouldn't have your tools like that, because if you trip and fall, you're going to land on them. And I thought, that kind of makes sense. That's gonna hurt, right? So although it was convenient where they were located, it probably wasn't the best choice of where they were. And so maybe that might be a topic. Last night in my other club, we have a safety person that does their safety thing, kind of like we do on our Saturday meetings. And she had brought up where your first aid kits are located. Can you get to your first aid kit if you're hurt? What's in your first aid kit? I'm a firm believer in having tourniquets laid around. You got to stop the bleeding. And where are your tourniquets located? Do you know how to put on your tourniquet? Have you rehearsed with your tourniquet? Is it opened up to the size of your limb? Have you tried putting it on with your left hand if you're right-handed? All these little things that, you bleed out pretty quick and lose consciousness pretty fast. And it's really hard to dial those 3 digits on the phone when you're sound asleep. So if anybody wants something like that, I have no problem giving a tourniquet class, talking about the safeties, why you're not allowed to take your tourniquet off. Only a doctor can take your tourniquet off, things like that. If that's something you guys want, I have no problems giving that class. I've given it a bazillion times in the military.
Super. I'll take you up on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doug, that's a really good point. These are the kind of things on first aid kit and fire extinguisher, all those kind of things that we generally just don't like to think about it, well, okay, I'll do that tomorrow, but I'm glad you brought that up. That's very good point, sir.
Bruce, back to possible future things. I want to reiterate what's already been said here. We all forget things, or we change as time goes on. So I don't see any problem with going back and recycling some of the topics we've had in the past, because I've either forgotten about them, or at that time we discussed it, I wasn't ready to try it. Well, maybe I am today. So I don't see any problem with recycling some of these same topics.
I just want to chip in for David, who says that he's just starting and likes that the finish he's been using. I used that when I started using it, the Danish oil, and that was 15 years ago, and I haven't moved on from it since. So Don't feel bad about that.
Well, I don't, it's okay. It looks like it's gonna put a nice gloss on when you first put it on, then it goes dull. So I'm looking for something else.
Dull turnings, that's my specialty.
Yeah,
Yeah, not everything you want to be shiny.
I
But
know.
some things you do.
Yeah,
You don't want shine on a nice bowl, for instance, that sits on a table.
yeah.
One of the things that on the safety topic that we were on the subject of wearing rings, I hadn't thought too much about it, but I don't know how many of you follow Stumpy Nubs on YouTube. But he talked about having had an accident and then had his ring. It wasn't so much that the ring got caught on anything. It's the fact that he had an injury to that particular finger and it started to swell. And it swelled up. He needed to get the ring off. The jeweler couldn't do it because it was one of those nice fancy rings you make that was titanium. So he had to go to his shop, get his grinder out, grind through it on both sides in order to cut it in half to get it off so his finger would go back down and not swell up so hard. So that was an issue that I hadn't thought of in terms of getting an injury to the finger and it swelling, not so much catching the ring on something.
Most emergency rooms have techniques to remove rings in situations like that. One of which is to wrap your finger with string or shoelace in a certain way, which is one way. They also have some kinds of clippers that will go in and cut off the ring. So rather than trying to use a grinder to cut off your ring and ended up cutting your skin too, you may want to just go to the emergency room and have them help you.
Can they
It's
deal with
something that's a common problem.
Can they deal with titanium?
I have no idea.
Because I know my wife just had to have her rings cut off. And the jeweler had a nice little device that went down and just cut through the rings. So if they're typical ring material, that's not an issue. Titanium, though, introduces a whole new aspect to it. So
Valid point. I don't know, Bruce. Yeah, because usually ring is a gold material, which is relatively soft, and I think you can use some kind of a wedge tool to wedge through and separate the gold. May not work for titanium. So I honestly don't know the answer to that.
I gotta go and check on my plumber. I'll be back.
okay,
David, before you go, please mute.
Oh.
Bruce, another thing that I think is a good topic, and this was when I was typing the notes, and that was access to different supplies in wood turning or different wood turning things. I still have the notes from that. That was one of our very early sessions, but that's one thing I actually go and refer to frequently whenever I'm looking for supplies. For example, if somebody wants to have certain kinds of woods or certain access to certain things that are maybe not purchasable locally. So that's another topic. How do you access some of the things people talk about during Chips and Grits or from a Tuesday demo or something like that? So access to things like that is helpful. Also, another topic is different ways to mount the same project on a lathe. For example, certain woods or certain shapes may be put on the lathe different ways that are easier than others for beginners or for more advanced turners. Since we have a variety of levels, it's nice to know different ways to do it. Some things are much more difficult than others as far as how to start a project. So I think it's good to address the different levels of turning that we have and the different kinds of projects. And as far as, David just left, but as far as finishes are concerned, different finishes react differently on different kinds of woods too. So it's helpful if you have a block and you have to cut the corners off, because then you have 4 different ways to sample different kinds of finishes. For example, I was working with zebra wood the other day and found that certain things darken it more than others, whether it's poly or walnut oil or something like that. So David, since you just came back, as far as finishes are concerned, I just wanted to mention that different finishes are different for different kinds of woods. So if you're starting from a square block and cutting off the corners, always save those corners so you can test whether poly works better or Danish oil and how it changes the color or the sheen on your wood too. So
Good idea.
That's a very good idea, Kathy. I never thought of saving those pieces that I cut off and use them as test pieces. I like that idea. That's cool.
I
It's
watched
helped me
Kathy do
several
that the
times.
other day, and it was a surprise that for that particular wood, I can't remember if it was a Danish oil or poly changed the color in ways she didn't anticipate. And so one of them popped out reddish tint more, and another one caused a darker brownish tint. So in doing that, it gives you the option to choose what do you want the appearance of your final product. And it's a good technique. She's been doing it. I haven't done it like that very much. She has done it several times, and I think it's helped to fill in which answer the question, what kind of a finish do I want on this particular project?
yeah, in this case, like I said, I was working with the zebra wood and I wanted it to keep the lights and the darks and things like that. And so they were all clear walnut oil, clear Danish oil, clear poly, clear. So I tried all of them and it was interesting. The one that I thought I would end, I was not really wanting to use poly on this particular project because last time I did, there was too much sheen to it. But it ended up being the only one that didn't darken the light parts of it, even though everything was clear. So it's an interesting way to do it. So I always save them until I'm finished with the project.
Well, to give you an example, I turned, it's probably been about a year ago, turned a walnut bowl, and I chose to put walnut oil on it.
Hmm.
And I like walnut oil, but this particular piece of wood was a little bit on the dark side, but when I put that oil on it, it made it really dark, and it was not what I wanted. So had I done the testing like you're suggesting beforehand, I probably would have learned that, oh, wait a minute, this is too dark. And when I put the walnut oil, it was too late. I couldn't go back and fix it. So um, so I like this idea. Way to go, Kathy.
Oh,
I like
thanks.
it too. I'm working on a piece uh, that's Purple Heart, and I have no idea what's going to happen to it when I put a finish on it. I have a feeling it's just gonna look like brown wood. So we'll have to see. I like the idea of testing it. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Thanks. Another topic, Bruce, is sanding. I know sanding's such our favorite thing. It's not mine, but anyway, sanding techniques. For example, Dick taught us how to do some wet sanding with water. With walnut oil, on some pieces, I've learned to do some wet sanding with walnut oil. When you're finished, it's finished also, but it helped with something that was a little difficult to finish. And when do you use a sanding sealer versus not using a sanding sealer? And having used that sanding sealer, how does that affect what you're going to do later? Because you've already sealed the wood that you may not want to have sealed. So sanding, though not a popular topic, the aids that you use in sanding to make different woods sand better, I think would be a good topic.
bench came over to my house the other day and sharpened my my bolt gouge, and he showed me how to use it. And I showed him, you know, I was using it, and he showed me that the way he sharpened it, you can cut so fine that you don't almost don't need the sand. It was amazing to see that tool do that. It just made me how smooth it came out just by using the tool.
Well,
Well,
David,
that's
that's
training the
your, that's the
operator
bar
too.
you want to reach and get to that point so that, you know, all of us have that problem.
Yeah,
But you do want to learn how to get a real good finish so you minimize
yeah,
or eliminate sanding.
so, yeah,
I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it.
yeah, yeah. He showed me on a piece of wood that we using. I did one, then he did one, and it didn't need to sand his. It was just slick as hell.
Well, with experience, you'll find that different woods behave differently
Yeah.
too. So you may get a real nice smooth finish on one type of wood and another one will tear out no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So
Well, this was
it does make a difference which wood
yeah,
it
well,
is.
this was just a soft piece of scrap wood that I was using to test the tool, and he did it on that soft piece of wood, and it was amazing how slick it was.
On that note, Kathy and I have taken a couple of craft supply classes with Kirk DeHeer, and one of the projects is done with aspen. And he said it's intentional. It's a little bit softer hardwood, and it's intentional that you have to work harder and get your cut better in order to not end up with tear out and a fuzzy surface. So trying to do what you're doing with a softer wood, if you can get that one cleaned up well, then you've learned good tool technique and it'll cascade over into your other hardwoods too. So there's nothing wrong with trying to get good smooth cuts on 2x4s from from Home Depot. If you can do it with that, then you can do it with the better quality woods too.
Mm.
David, if you get a good enough cut with your tool, you can start sanding probably around 220 as opposed to starting at 80
Yeah,
or 100.
yeah.
You know, so
180.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some of us start at 60.
I do on
Bruce,
some.
I have a 36 if you need to use it sometime.
That may help.
Or a 10 grit.
One of the things that makes a difference, though, like Ken said, is the wood. I made an olive oil bowl with a lid, and that turned just so beautiful. When I got done, if you sanded it, you just screwed it up. And I just left it natural. So getting the right wood is a blessing.
Yeah. I usually start at 180, you go to 240 and then 320, now you go to 400 and then 600.
Yeah, and that's another thing we could talk about too, because when you go to 600, you're going to screw up some of the finishes you may want to put on it
Yeah.
because it's too smooth.
Bruce, you're going to have to expound on that because I've never had that problem. I don't know what problem that kind of a finish is creating. I've just never seen it.
If you want to do like an oil finish and you go to a 600 or so, you've sealed off the pores so tightly, the finish can't get into it. And so those are some of the things that I've heard about in various classes. So there is a point at which you don't want to go beyond, depending on what you're doing. If you want a nice high gloss finish though, you're right, you want to go up in grits.
Well, conceptually, I've heard and read what you've just described, but I've never personally experienced that.
I
Has
guess in-
anybody, has
Go ahead.
anybody used a grinder? Do you use a grinder, or I use the strips sometimes, the sanding strips, and then I have a grinder that I use, but it skips. I'm not very good at it, using the grinder.
What are you using the grinder for?
Sanding,
For sanding?
No, I've never used a
Never
grinder.
done that.
I would caution against using a grinder because you have a risk of taking a lot of material off very quickly with a grinder. Just one little slip and you all of a sudden have a deep groove in the wood that you're trying to finish.
Do you mean a grinder or a hand sander?
hand sander.
Yeah, that's different.
It's a hand. It's got the circle about that big around, and put it in a drill and sand with it.
Oh,
I use that.
Okay, that's power
quite often.
sanding.
Power sanding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
do
do
power
the
sanding
power sanding.
frequently.
Yeah, but mine skips a lot.
At the symposium, Jay Shepherd had a time where he did sanding and finishing, and he did it. It was recorded, so if you went, you could go back in and see it and print out. And he talks about that. One of the things that he uses was not the little disc on a drill, but he said a random orbital sander, and he liked that better than the drill.
Another topic I was thinking of as you're mentioning different things, and Dick can probably help with this. When you're putting texturing or wood burning or some of those things on afterwards, are you sanding differently to prepare the wood than if you are just putting a finish on it? So that's another topic too, is maybe when you're embellishing, how does sanding and pre-putting different finishes like a sealer on it affect that embellishment afterwards?
It would be a good topic because in many cases you want a very smooth finish. You don't want any finish on it. For example, if you're wood burning, you don't want a wood burn through varnish or oil or something else. So you have to get your sequence right.
Yeah, when I do that, I don't put a finish on. A lot of times, what I'm wood burning over is a drawn image, something I've already drawn on it, and I don't want to get the graphite from the pencil lines embedded down into the wood. Although there is a product that Bear Brown introduced me to that Woodturners use that adheres to the surface of the wood, and you can print your design on that, and then burn through through that product, through that layer into the wood. But generally, I wouldn't put any kind of a finish on before I started burning.
Bruce,
also
this kind of touches on what you started the discussion about, and you don't want to go the way of the AAW, very high-end artsy discussions, but many of us do embellishments of various sorts. Are you wanting to avoid topics on embellishment, or would that fit into your notion for future chips and grits?
No, I'm fine with embellishments. That's not an issue. what I personally don't care so much for is AAW, where you turn something and then you carve away most of it and you're left with this very lacy-like structure. That's not something I think most of us are going to get into. It doesn't particularly interest me. And it's kind of one of those deals where it's good to go watch a demo because now you know what you don't want to do. And that's a type of thing, you know, that I think is getting too far out there. You know, I think it was the last magazine where there was a glob in the center, and then there was these spindly things that came way off at all kinds of different angles and twists and turns, and, you know, kind of ends up looking like a spider when it's done. More complicated than what appeals to me.
Well, I think that embellishment is a big field and there's different types of embellishments, each one of which could be a topic for discussion. I understand what you're saying about some of what you see. I wonder what part of that was even made on a lathe. And so I think our club most of the members would lean more toward functional pieces than the high-end gallery art pieces. And that's what we're seeing in the AAW journals. So I would agree with you, Bruce. It's good to see them sometimes. It's good to, if you can, watch how some of them are made, but most of us aren't going to do that.
There's a lot of time involved with some of the like the illusion platters that Phil Brown, and the carving that Dick and Dan do. That there's a lot of work there. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I will try it, but I have a lot of respect for those that spend that time to get those kind of results. They're really beautiful pieces of artwork. But you know, everybody's different, and you choose how you want to finish your bowl. So it's great. You know, I love looking at those pieces of artwork. But yeah, everybody's different.
I always chuckle because Dan says, "Oh, it's real easy." Man, there's no way that would be easy for me. But there's a different level between stuff that Dan does. I like it a lot. Would I ever try it? Maybe down the road. But then
Yeah.
you look at a piece that Jay Fennell does and all that piercing and the detail work that he puts into the piece. And I know instantly that that's just way out of my league.
Well,
Sometimes watching things though help you know if that's something that interests you or not. I watched a demo at the symposium and I've seen people airbrush and do things like that before, but after she showed her process, I thought I could have wood turned about 3 things before I was finished with that project. So it's not something at this point I want to take up. It might be fun in the future, but watching it helps you know if it's an interest or not.
I
You know,
agree.
Phil Brown tells me that, oh, you know, looking at one of his illusion platters, he said, yeah, I was kind of laid up, you know, with the surgery I had, and I was just sitting in my recliner while I was watching TV and filling in the colors, and I I just can't imagine myself doing that. Sitting in the recliner and trying to concentrate on that. But if it works for him, great. But I don't think it worked for me.
Well, for what it's worth, the August monthly meeting, I'm going to do a demonstration on how to do a basket illusion vase. And I'm going to go through all the steps. So you'll be able to know by the end of that demo whether it's for you or not. And I think probably at least 80% of the club will say, I'm never going to do that. But it will expose you to it. And that will be my purpose.
Yeah.
And
And
then
that's
if you want to follow up, then some of us, like Phil Brown and myself, were available. So it's an exposure, and that's sort of what we get at symposiums too. Some of it is, boy, I don't know that I could ever do that or want to do that, but it's interesting to see that it can be done. So
Right.
look forward to the August demo, and you'll find out a little bit more about basket illusion.
And you're assuming that everybody's gonna stay awake that long.
Oh, I guarantee it, Jerry.
I got some, I have a problem here. You see that? That's as good as I can do with my burning system. And I'm kind of looking at that stamp you guys have that has a logo and everything. Where do you get that?
Notice how everybody jumped on that comment?
So
The
I
best
have a
thing,
laser. I have a laser that does my logo, and I am nowhere near as good with my laser as Barry is. The only thing I know how to do is push the correct buttons on my computer and make it make my logo. And that's pretty cool. If you're not ready to go that route, you can go on Amazon and you can order different irons with you literally tell them what you want it to say, and then whatever the cost is, and they'll ship it to you. And the most common way they're used is with your torch, like if you're soldering pipes. Here, I've got one handy right here. One of these bad boys, if you guys can see me. And you just heat up your iron that way, and then you press it onto the wood. It's either going to work real well or it's going to work real bad. There's not a lot of in between. If you shift just a little bit, it's going to throw your logo off, but it's not the end of the world. Then you just sand it off again and try it again. That's probably a cheaper way to get started. But yeah, and then so other things that are being done out there that are pretty common now. I haven't done this yet, but some of my friends in my other club have. You can order chips. They almost look like a poker chip, and you order them with your logo on them, whatever you want your logo to be, and you just glue it right into the bottom of your piece. And then some people will put a clear resin right over that. I've seen some of the chips. I think it's Doug Moore on YouTube. His are clear chips with his logo engraved, pole barn. And sometimes he'll put a colored resin behind it. Sometimes he'll put a clear resin if he wants the wood to shine through. So there's a lot of different options out there as far as how you want to put your logo on.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, I think that would be a great topic. Just how do you sign your work? Because there's a lot of different ways, and there's a problem with each of the ways. And so, for example, my son gave me a logo that fit on the end of a soldering iron. And I tried it, but I've stayed away from it because when you have something like that, you have to have a very flat surface and you have to apply the iron or the logo piece that's heated up perfectly to get a good, clear, crisp burn. So I could never quite get there. So I've avoided that. I, in fact, use a wood burner by hand, but it depends on the wood burner. I had to go to, I use a special razor tip pin that has a 1/64 of an inch diameter bead on the end. And it can give me some very fine writing. Other writing tips that I had before were just too large and too gross. So and it depends on what wood burner you're actually using If it's one of the lower end, cheaper wood burners, you may never get there the way my real fine tip will do. So this is actually a good topic for exploring a lot of discussion points, because some of our club members are using their lasers to laze directly on the piece. Some are doing a laser on a chip and then gluing that chip in place. I was taught you can use an ink pen of like a paint pen to sign your name. I've avoided that because it seems like when you put a finish on it, it might dissolve it. So there's a whole lot of different techniques, and maybe we should explore those, Bruce. I think it'd be a good topic to go through for a chips and grits discussion.
I think so too. David, the only thing I will add is I understand your issue with wood burning into the bottom. I've gone to totally finishing the piece. And then after it's finished, I have a special fine ink pen that I can write on the bottom of it what it is. And so that's a lot easier to control than a wood burner. The other advantage of it is if you get into a situation where one of the club members identified the piece of wood as being made out of popular rather than poplar, you can use a little hairspray, take that ink off and reapply it correctly spelled.
I like
So
that.
see, I
too.
have terrible handwriting and I can't spell. So if I try to do it by hand, we're going to be standing a lot.
The other
Chris,
thing I've
when you
heard
use it-
some people say is the one where you burn the thing into the wood, put it in a drill press. That way it stays steady. Use a drill press to bring it down, touch the piece, come back up. If it's not exactly the way you want it, you have at least a shot of being able to give a second hit.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I never thought of that.
That is a good idea. David, I have one of those branding irons that we've been talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, you showed it to me.
Yeah, and I don't use it very often. It says handcrafted by Mark Oglesby. But so anyway, the reason I don't use it, it's so hard to get the entire portion of it heated correctly. When one end of it is heated up, the other end cools off. And then when I use the branding iron on the wood, it doesn't show up. And don't try to do it twice because it doesn't work.
You'll never like it.
If you buy one of those, highly recommend getting one that is electric, so that it's all evenly heated. But at any rate, whatever you choose, try test it like Kathy had mentioned previously. Test it on a piece of wood. Just practice a little bit with it. So
Yeah.
before you actually do it on your bowl.
Well, one of the problems I have with it, mine's real cheap one. I bought it for $38, and it's got one pin I can show it to you. See, it's got that pin. That's the only thing I use. And it's not very good. Not very good. And I get dark marks on it and see like this. It looks terrible. Looks terrible.
Well, I hate to say it, David, but you'll probably never get satisfactory results with that wood burning pen.
Yeah. So I gotta figure something else out.
Well, I
Yeah.
want to tell the group that there might be, or will be, I should say, at least 2 wood burning kits in the sale. the auction. I was helping yesterday, Rick and Zim. We went through all the stuff that has been donated or set for the auction. We categorized, priced, and numbered, I think, 90 items for the auction so far. So there's two wood burners there that I know of, and there might be more show up later. So if you're interested in that, David, be sure to come to the
Yeah.
meeting for the auction.
And I'm gonna have some stuff to sell or to give away in the auction.
Right.
One is the pro grind system. So I ordered the Wolverine, and I'm gonna get rid of the pro grind system.
One question I have, when you're signing with wood burning at the bottom of a bowl, you know how you have your different grains that are going across part of it? When you're wood burning, certain parts of the grain seem to wood burn better than others if
Yeah.
you're going across grain as you're
Yeah.
writing. And if anybody has tips on that, that'd be helpful too, just because it flows really well. And I have been practicing the flow into it and flow out of it for the lines, but you hit a certain grain and it's like it's going to stop there, and others it flows. So tips on that would be helpful to me.
I don't know if there's an answer to that, Kathy, but you're right. And sometimes when I'm writing, all of a sudden my A looks like an E now. And how do I fix this? And I've already burned the wood, but I don't know if there's a good way to do that other than maybe going to laser like Doug does. And I think Chuck and a few other people do the lasers. But if you find an answer, I'd like to learn about it too.
One tip is when you're wood burning, you want this wood surface to be as absolutely smooth as you can get it. So you want to go to at least 600 grit. And if you can go above that, have the sandpaper do that. Nonetheless, in the situation you're describing, it's just a matter of feel, because you have to change the touch and the time when you go across a harder grain than the soft grain, because the soft grain is going to burn easily, the harder grain won't. That's just a matter of practice and paying attention to where you're actually burning and adjusting on the fly. There's not a whole lot else you can do with it, but sanding as smooth as possible is a good first step.
Yeah.
One technique I will share with you when I'm signing with the pen, I do it the first pass just lightly, very lightly, and create my signature, and then second time go back and then fill in the spots that didn't get dark the first time. So maybe you can try that.
One
Yeah.
of the things you could do, Mark, though, is you could have a split personality. You could sell some things as Mark Oglesby and other things as Merk Oglesby.
There you go. Yeah. Mark, who is that guy?
Mark, you touch on one other point there, and that is whatever you're doing when you're signing, you want to turn down the heat to as low as you can possibly get it and still get a signature. And sometimes you may want to do it very low and then go back over it a second time.
Right.
I'm glad to hear it's working for you. I have trouble retracing my own path, so I try to avoid a second burn.
Maybe that's another good reason for the cutoffs that I like to try the different finishes on, is save one to practice on, because the piece that we practice on before signing is not necessarily the same wood that will be used on the bottom of a bowl. So just thought of that one.
That's a very good point, Kathy, because like we've talked about, finishes behave differently on different woods. wood burning behaves differently on different woods too. So you do need to practice on a piece of that particular type of wood. That's easier said than done sometimes. You may not have the scraps for it. I
And even
always
if
keep,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
I always keep, I've got a flat piece of, it's just maple next to our wood burner to always test on that first, but that's maple. If I then try to burn on a different wood, it won't work quite the same. So your suggestion to have some of that wood available is a very good suggestion too. It's sometimes hard to get those scraps.
And so if you do go with the laser, it's also that same issue. The different power based on the wood, like if I'm doing the resin and colored pencils versus, you know, just a piece of, I don't know, mesquite or something, it'll be different.
So Mark, is there a laser for sale in the auction? Because I see another tool that's gonna happen someday.
I did not see any kind of a laser system in all those tools. That doesn't mean that one won't show up, but I didn't see one in what we have already. But there's a lot of stuff. There's some at least two tool rests.
Really?
Yeah, big ones. Probably 12-inch maybe.
I just ordered the tool rests from.
And you said that earlier, and I
Yeah.
was thinking about that when you said that.
Is it robust?
Robust makes an excellent tool rest, though. I have one of theirs, one of the curved ones for when I'm doing deeper bowls. So you will be happy with your purchase from Robust. They make a great product.
I don't recall what the brand was, if it even had a name on it. I don't know. I know it was 1 inch
Yeah.
post though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm planning on buying about 6 of them.
Okay.
Now we get a curved one, outside curve, inside curve, straight, 12-inch, and then I'm gonna get maybe a 6-inch straight one.
David, you may hold off on that because with experience, you'll find you may only use one or two tool rests.
You know,
There's a lot of them out there available. I've bought some and I've never used some of them. So I would just hold off until you get to a point where you actually need it
yeah,
for a project, and because it'll always be available for you out
yeah.
there
But
somewhere.
right now, I have the one that came with the lathe, with my jet, and it's getting a lot of nicks in it. I gotta sand it. I gotta file it down every day almost, and it's a 12-inch, and that's all I use. 12-inch. So I'll probably be happy with Robust, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with Ken though. Don't order them all at one time. Well, all right. I believe in looking at things from multiple views. So we'll look at Ken's viewpoint first. Don't buy everything right away. See what you're going to use. I'll give you the other viewpoint. I'm really good at helping you spend your money. So I'll come over there and I'll pick out all kinds of them for you to order as long as you're paying for them. Probably go with Ken's advice. Just
You're
take
so
it easy a little bit.
you're so kind.
The other thing
I
is,
recommend you take Ken's advice over my advice.
the other thing is buy maybe one and then just write out the club for a year, because we end up with sales and
Yeah.
it's a great way to pick up what you need for
Yeah.
a very reasonable price.
Well, I'm looking forward to going to the auction. I'm probably going to buy a lot of stuff at the auction.
Well, as one of the auctioneers, I'll keep looking at you. I'll say, here we go, here we go, here we go, here we go, David. Right? Give me another 5, David.
Recently, Dick Kelly gave a Tuesday demo on the fact that sometimes tools look more promising when you see them than when you start using them. So sometimes you have to have extra practice with them once you get them. to find out if it really works for you. So if it doesn't work when you buy it at this auction, keep in mind you can sell it again next year.
I gotta go check on my plumber again. I'll be back.
Mhm. Yeah, the answer is to practice, 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 and get a feel for the tool. I think that's something that's really underrated. Uh, is you can't just kind of grab a tool off and stab it into the wood. You have to uh, kind of develop a feel for it. I know one of the demonstrators that was at the symposium who I would have lined up to see was Raleigh Monroe. And he makes his own tools. And I bought one a long time ago and I could never make it work. But I realized that was my first experience with a carbide tip. And I just wasn't using it right. And now I've got a bunch of carbide tips that I have a better feel for, and they don't present the problems that Raleigh's tool did when I was first using it. So, and this kind of goes to what Kathy is saying with having blocks and also the consideration of having wood around, which is the same, just to get a feel for what you're doing is just practice, practice, practice. You might not initially be able to make it work perfectly or as well as you want. It may take 10 or even 15 minutes of practice before you master the thing. So just practice.
I do have a request as being part of the team that preparing for the auction with Rick and Zim yesterday. If you have tools or machines that you want to put in the auction, get them to us as quickly as you can. You know, maybe at a Tuesday breakfast, or just let us know. One of us will pick it up, because we have some volunteers that are going to help in the process. Kathy and Jamie, Rick's wife, are going to help with in the computer and the sale, and then Doug, Rick are going to be the auctioneers. I'm going to be a spotter and helping with the thing. But anyway, if we can get those tools beforehand and get them itemized, categorized, and priced, it's going to work out so much better as opposed to the morning of the auction. Somebody shows up with a box full of, well, we have to spend the time to get those ready. We spent probably 4.5, maybe 5 hours yesterday getting that ready. So it's time consuming. So so if you have tools and spread the request to some people that you might talk to, get those to us so we're going to do the same thing at least one more time before the auction. So there it is.
Well, Mark, thanks for the time you've dedicated to it already. I'm sure that's going to help it go much more smoothly when the auction actually happens. So thank you for that.
Well, and you know, the team worked very, very well last year. And Jamie and Kathy were uh, in control of the items and taking the money and stuff, and it just worked well. Doug, you can back me up on that. You know, it went very well. We had a lot of fun with it too, so it was great.
It was definitely fun. The one improved that I said last year that I wanted us to do this year was when the person won the bid, have them go over to the table, pay for it, and take it. Because at the end, then we had everybody coming up to try and get their stuff. And there were some people saying, hey, I know I bought this. Where is it? Ken, I think you were one of the ones that we were trying to find your piece at the end of the day. Can't remember what it was, a Chuck or Jaws or something that you'd purchased. And I'm like, I know he bought this. Where did it go? And people were already cleaning up, and that got a little confusing.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that, Doug, but yeah, I think I'd bought a Chuck and somebody else had, I think at the end of the meeting, cleaned up and put it in a box thinking nobody had bought it.
Right.
So
So
I think your
this year,
suggestion is
I really
great.
like, yeah, when the person wins the bid, put it in their hands so they have it. I trust Ken's not going to run out and not pay for it, but I don't want to not have that issue again.
And if he does, we know where he lives.
That's true. I've been to his house. We could go.
Speaking of,
One of the issues with it too is when we were sorting, when people won the bid, had one table available and I put everything that one person did together so that some people were writing one check for multiple items. For example, if David's going to buy a dozen things, he doesn't want to come and get 12 different things at different times. So we have to work through that process a little bit as far as how that's working, but if we had a place to put them off the table once it's purchased, that's better than leaving it on the table. Ken was handling some other things at the same time and didn't get back to pick up that one that Zim bought. And then he had to unbuy it. So it's kind of a matter of maybe we can remove it from the table somehow. I'm not quite sure how
Or
that
you know
would
what,
work.
Kathy, I can bring like a whole bunch of Post-it notes. And I
Yeah.
can just blast the person's name right on that Post-it note, stick it on there. Then we know, hey, this has been purchased. Don't put it in the put away box. That belongs to Ken. It's his Chuck. He needs it. He'll pay for it. And then, yeah, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll bring.
I think that works. If
Okay.
you don't have a lot, I have some too, but I have to take the slips over to Jamie so it can be entered in the computer. And at that point I was sorting it by person so that they could come up and do that. But yes, marking it sold in some way would be really helpful. And the people who want to rush and clean up need to maybe take a breath for a minute before the tables are cleaned up.
Yeah.
Mark,
speaking
I'm
of
just-
Chucks,
Mark?
there's at least four John Chucks, maybe five, that's going to be in the auction. And a couple of them are the old style with the Tommy bars on to tighten the jaws down. But if you don't have one or you just want a spare, then it's a good buy.
Mark, has the group looked or contacted other clubs that have had auctions and sales to see how they do it? So that perhaps we can get a better idea of what Doug and Kathy are talking about to make it a little bit more efficient.
Have not. I don't think Rick has, but it might be something we can explore.
I think there's a pretty easy solution, one of which is, as Doug said, put a name on the item. But as he pointed out, you want to remove the item from the sale table. So I think all we have to do is set up a purchased table and you move it from that to the purchase table with the name on it. And then if Kathy and Jamie haven't been able to catch up with it, at least it's on a sold table and it gets out of the way of Doug and Rick trying to sell the next item. So it's a matter of organizing it when we set up that day. And I'll be glad to help with that organization.
Yeah, one issue, I guess if people like board members have card tables or something they could bring that would work for that. We filled every table last year that PAW had, just setting the items out. I don't know if there'll be that many items this year, but there was no available extra table last year. And we don't want to set things on anything for YEI's material,
Yeah,
so we would
no,
need to have our own.
We could
like
though,
the-
just create a spot in the floor.
I have a couple
Well-
tables that I'll bring.
I can do that too.
I
We
like the
also
idea of
have
a,
some empty tubs that we could bring, and if some individual is buying multiple things, put it all in one tub, put a name on the tub.
Yeah. That'd be a
I
good
like
thing.
the idea of a sold table or putting them in one spot. The reason we chose to do it the way Kathy was talking about at the end last year, because if people are say, okay, I got my item, and during the auction then go over to pay for it, that creates a lot of traffic, you know, from their chair up to the item and then over, and it kind of disrupts the auction process. So
Yeah, I agree,
that was
Mark.
the reason. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree with that, Mark, and I very much agree with that. I would suggest that what we do is have some sold table like that and ask everybody to wait till the end of the auction and then go through and pay for all of their items.
Yeah,
And we need to encourage the people who are helping, don't be in a rush to take everything down and put it away. Take a
Right.
breath, as Kathy
Yeah.
said, take a deep breath, hang out for a little bit, talk with your friends and neighbors, and let us finish the process. I think that
The
was part
one-
of what happened last year is everybody was so anxious to get away. They took
Mhm.
things off of that table, threw it in a box and said, these were unsold, and it was wrong.
Exactly. No, you have to think about the timing of it too. Doug and Rick are alternating as auctioneers. So the person who has just auctioned it, the other person could move it to the sold table or vice versa. They could work that out. But every time a slip is given to me, I have to run it back to Jamie, who has and sort it into the groups for the buyers. And Jamie's recording it. There's a time element for the people who are working the option, and adding more people to help doesn't work because it's smooth that way. I know some people were getting underfoot by trying to help, but there's a timing to getting all of that done that works efficiently. And having Mark as a spotter helps because I don't always know some of the new people who are buying things names. He can help with that if I need to, because I have to quickly put the name on for Jamie and for sorting on the table. And people were ready to come buy things, but they were really good about the fact that I called off their name to come get their papers to go to the purchase table. So it worked efficiently to do that if people were patient last year.
I just had a thought about maybe how to identify the items that have been sold. Yesterday, when we were pricing things, each item has a number,
Mhm.
and we put it on the red gaffer's tape that or red or orange, whatever it is, a little 1-inch square with a number on it. Okay, so and I can carry a Sharpie marker or something like that, and then when it's sold, just put a little check mark on it. So as we're putting things away, if an item is still laying on the table, it has a check mark on it, we go to Kathy and Jamie and say, who bought this? And then we can pair the two together, the item with the buyer. So
Well,
maybe we
for
can
our
do something like that.
Yeah, for our first auction last year that was held that way, I think it went very, very well. If Ken was the only problem child, then, that's pretty good considering the number of things that were purchased. So I just have to make sure he doesn't get distracted when he needs to go pick up his stuff.
And that's not the first time Ken's been a problem child.
Well,
It
I
won't be
don't
the
know that
last.
one. I just know it was at the end, and I was frustrated because I knew it was an item that I auctioned off, and I clearly remembered it, and I couldn't find it, and it was driving me crazy. So that's why that one stuck in my head, and why I remembered specifically it was Ken. There was a few others, but we were able to solve the issue and find it, and I never found it, and I went home so frustrated, thinking I know he bought that thing, and what happened to it, and so I kind of took that one a little personal.
Did we ever find the item, Ken?
Yes. What happened was somebody had moved that to a box that was thought to have been unsold. Zim went over, looked in that box and bought it. Well, so he had it in his possession. I had to get it back from Zim and gave him refunded his amount, whatever he paid for it. And, we did find it, but it actually took a few days, if I remember right, to figure this
Yeah.
all out. So what I suggest is for this auction this time, let's all get together just before the auction and agree on what's the process we're going to go through to try to avoid this kind of a problem. We're discussing some of it right now, but between now and the auction, somebody may come up with an outstanding idea that will make it go very efficiently. So let's just plan on meeting that day and make sure everybody understands the procedure we're going to go through.
I think Doug's idea with sticky notes is gonna work.
I think that's
I
helpful.
agree. I agree. And Mark's idea of putting a check mark or something, well, we could also take just like we've got these removable sale stickers, little dots we often use for items at our sales. Well, we
Yeah.
can just stick say a green dot or an orange dot on the item, not even worry about it. But between that, showing it's been sold, and the number that you've already put on it should avoid any of these problems. Let's work that out on that day.
You can also put the guy's name that bought it on a sticky note.
Well, but that takes more and more time. During the auction, Doug and Rick were going as fast as they could, and they did a great job of it, but it still took a long time to get through that. If Mark says we've already got 90 items to auction off, it's going to take a while. So we don't want to add any operations that really take extra time.
And maybe initials rather than just the name, just write initials or something.
Yeah.
But I think with the cross check with the numbers, it's not as big a deal as you think it might be. I actually had to slow Rick and Doug down just a little bit at times because two of them went faster than Jamie and I did because I was moving everything across and sorting. So, but like I say, for our first auction, I thought it went rather smoothly. I don't think we want to add a lot of more steps to the process, but having a sold table and the sticky notes or something will be helpful in the long run. We can't quite put it in order by person, but if they come over with their slips and somebody is monitoring that sold table at that point in time, then they can look for the numbers because they'll be in a chronological order because of the way the auction works. So that'll make it easier.
Hey Kathy, one of the things to consider, if we would put the list in Google Sheets, two people could be in the same sheet at the same time. And then that way the person entering the data only has to do every other one.
I think it's working smoothly as it is with Jamie,
Okay.
Jamie doing the Excel and with me sorting the solds after she gets them. So that works a little bit better. So.
Okay. So I don't know about you guys, but for me, this has been very productive.
Wait, hold on a minute. Now, Bruce, I had a thought here.
Go for it.
Kathy, don't we have, Ken, don't we have headsets that one can talk to another in the same room?
Yes,
are
we have 3 of
cordless?
those now that we use during the meetings. We can use that. How would you suggest we use those?
Well, I just had a brainstorm here. If Kathy had one of the headset and I had one, then Kathy could say to me, "Hey, Mark, who just bought item number 47?" And I could answer that, pretty easily. Or if she had a request or something, we could talk without having to yell across the room.
Good idea, Mark. I'll make sure the batteries are up to full batteries and bring them with me for that meeting.
I don't know if it will work, but it's possible that we could do that, But you're
Kathy, you're muted.
muted, Kathy.
It may help, but this point in time, I'm talking to Doug, I'm talking to Rick, and I'm talking to Jamie. And with the flow of things, because they're giving that information to me as we do that. I think the only time I would be asking you across the room is, who is that person? But quite often the person's telling me to, so it may
Well-
get confusing to have one more, but we can try it.
It may not work, but it might be worth a try. I also wanted to say, as Ken already alluded to, it's going to take a while for this because, as we already established, there's 90 items. Some of the items are just a box full of a bunch of stuff, and one number for the entire box. Or just we bundled some of like the tool rest. We bundled both of those and just wrapped them up, and that's one sticker. We can sell them separately, but 90 items already. Last year we had 107 items, so we're going to be getting more. And the morning of the sale, there's going to be more coming in. So there's a lot more items this time.
On an auction, doesn't the bidder get a number so that when he buys something, all you need to record is the number of the bidder? Because when he signs in and is assigned his number at Kathy's place, they know who number 57 is already. So all you got to do is say, number 57 just bought item 3 or whatever.
Last year we did it I organized it by last name because they weren't given numbers.
Well, Jerry,
So-
I think that's a good suggestion, but to make that work, we'd also had to pre-print numbers for people to flash a number. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's practical or not.
It was easy for
know.
me with last names because I know most everyone except the new people, because we have a number per item. And then if each person had a number also, that could be a little confusing. So I don't know. It worked for me. This year we have more new members, but it helped that quite a few of them went to the picnic because I did learn some last names. And Mark, thanks for helping with a few of those.
Well, you're welcome.
But Bruce, I am glad you've gotten more ideas for meetings. I think this is helpful.
The other thing is, I kind of sense this was a valuable meeting just to have an open mic. So periodically, we may just do one of those rather than a specific topic.
Well, Bruce,
have a
as I've
suggestion.
pointed out all along, and you've done the same thing, just because we have a topic for that day, it's still wide open, should be open mic. Everybody needs to feel comfortable with bringing up issues like, David, I'm glad you said you have trouble with the signatures. It should always be that way for every chips and grits. And it has been in the past. I hope it'll continue. Dick,
I
you had
agree.
something?
Yeah, I had I was saving this till the end or close to it because it has nothing at all to do with wood turning, and I'm not sure that this is the right venue for it at all. But I'll just put it out there. I would like a tutorial on how to use smartphones. It's a mystery to me.
Want to do that by a Zoom meeting sometime, Dick?
Oh, we could, yeah. I just round up people's smart, sympathetic, perceptive grandchildren, and they could bring us all up to date.
You know,
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think it fits in the chips and grits venue, but the club's Zoom account could be used to set up a special Zoom session for anybody who's interested.
I'm glad Ken said that because I was just going to say the same thing. We don't have to use chips and grits. We can just put out a message saying, just what you said there, Dick, that there's a lot of people that have trouble with it, and we're going to create a special session to explain smartphones and gets a little more on board with how to use them. So
I'll explain that we just came back from traveling and there were uh, people there who could just do magic with their smartphones. And when Mary and I were coming back, we said, that's on our agenda. We've got to figure out how to do that. They make easy work of this stuff that's just a mystery.
You had
Well,
an
one word
iPhone.
of caution, smartphones is a broad category. Now, are you talking about Android phones, Apple phones? Um,
We've got
and different
Android, so
models have different features, so it could become a real quagmire. You're going to maybe have to focus on, for this session, we'll talk about Apple iPhones. This session, we'll talk about Android phones.
Yeah, and the other thing is it could get to be an expensive proposition because once you learn out what the new features are, you may find out you want to change phones.
well, the other thing is how much they cost. Because not all these features are free, but it's something that, that somebody who knows what they're talking about would say, well, you may want to do this, that, or the other thing, but be aware that there's an additional charge for it or a roaming charge or something like that. That's all I have to say. Let's not get out on that. And it was semi cheek and tongue, so tongue in cheek, so that yeah. So we can be done with that.
What else?
Well, gentlemen, I've got to leave and deal with my plumber.
Well, good luck on the rest of your day's schedule.
Thank you so much for the first time that I logged into Zoom. We had a good session and I really enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to the next time.
All righty, we'll see you.
Okay, David.
Anything else by anyone?
Well, Bruce, have we added to your list of
Yes, a lot. Thank
possibilities?
you.
Good.
So Bruce, way back when you started these or whoever started these, but I remember when
Ken.
you and I had a conversation and I think it was about shop tours or whatever. And
Yes.
you said if need be, you could come by and do a recording that you could then play later on.
Yes.
Okay, so with the first aid stuff or whatever, because I am getting ready to go back to school here. So I won't have the time, but I just want to put that out there that if you did want to come over and we can do a video right here in my shop of what it actually takes to get to the tourniquet. And here's the thing that scares me about teaching people how to use tourniquets is the fear that's out there of if I put a tourniquet on, then that means I'm going to get that limb amputated, which is 100% not true if you get to the doctor within 6 hours. And let's face it, the big red truck's going to get there in plenty of time. You're not going to be wearing that tourniquet for 6 hours. And I would, that's the point that I'd really want to drive home. And I think it would probably be better in a video where we could edit it and make sure it's right and then put that out to the club. So I feel confident giving the class just because I've done it so many times. I don't feel confident that I'm going to have the time to do it in a chips and grits before school starts.
I'd like to
Gotcha.
suggest that since there are fewer people on chips and grits, that this be talk to Dan Hall, who's our safety person, and it could be something that's shown during a regular meeting if it's taped, so that it could be a safety moment. I think there's an advantage to doing safety that pertains to Woodturners, especially with first aid. And it may be different because the tools are different than someone who trips in their yard or other first aid. So I think that would be helpful to do that. So maybe let's work with Dan Hall. It may benefit more club members if we do it as a club meeting rather than just chips and grits.
Doug,
Okay.
approximately how long is the presentation?
I could probably do a good solid 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, and then it would be questions after that.
That would be perfect for us to show it at a meeting sometime. You know,
Yeah.
so I think Kathy's spot on, you know, just get Dan Hall involved. He is our safety coordinator. So if you work with him and maybe he can use it as a segment in an upcoming meeting.
Yeah.
I
he'll
agree,
be
it's a
out- he'll
great
be out of town.
suggestion.
Yeah, he'll be out of
And
town to mid-August though.
well, but one of the great things about the suggestion is it will get to all of our members if we do it at a monthly meeting. Whereas Chips and Grits is a small subset, but all of the members, and we record the meetings, so we could record the safety session, have that available. So we'll disseminate the information more broadly if we do it in that venue. But it's a great suggestion. Doug, talk to Dan and see how he can set that up and work with you. And yes, we have the camcorders and audio equipment that could be done to record it in your place.
Yeah, but
Okay.
Dan will be gone until about August 10th. He's traveling right now. So you can go ahead and email him, but he may or may not talk by phone right now.
That's fine.
Okay, anything else?
Awesome job today, Bruce.
Well, thank you all
Thanks,
for
Bruce.
participating. It would be nothing without you.
No, I think you'd be able to carry on, but I'm sure, you know, we'll have more people in the future. So,
Hopefully so.
yeah.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate
all
your
too.
help on this.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.